Everyone knows Masha and the Bear, the Russian cartoon about a mischievous little girl who constantly bothers her bear friend and other forest animals in the funniest ways possible. But did you know that this amazing animation hides a very dark origin that the creators try to keep under wraps at all costs? The animation, like many Disney productions that hide strange secrets, is based on an old folk tale. Since Masha and the Bear is a Russian series, the story was inspired by a Russian tale from around the 19th century. The tale is actually known by the same name as the animated series. While the comedy series shows Masha meeting a calm bear and spending her days pestering him, the tale reveals that terrible things can happen when you're not careful around bears. That's because the bear in the tale is far less friendly than the one we see in the series. According to the story, Masha was a young girl living with her grandparents when she went for a walk and stumbled upon an unknown house. She entered the house, and the bear who owned it appeared and forced her to become his servant. Masha agreed out of fear of being attacked by the fierce animal. She was kept captive for months and only managed to escape by hiding in a basket of food that she begged the bear to take to her grandparents. The tale is intended to warn children about the dangers of bears, given how common they are in Russia. But the series flipped the roles, making Masha the real danger. Well, at least we know she wouldn't try to harm her friends. Or would she? This tale is definitely darker than any episode of the series, making Masha face terrifying dangers involving pretty intense themes. You'd never expect to see this mischievous girl having to become a servant just to stay alive, right? And if I told you that's not even the darkest part of Masha's origin, because there's a real story that happened in Russia, which likely inspired the creation of this tale. Want to know the story of the real Masha? Then join us for another Cine Wave. We've talked about the real Masha before, whose tragic end involved being attacked by a circus bear. The series may have referenced this in a way, as the bear, who's Masha's friend in the cartoon, also worked in a circus. However, because this is such an old story, there's more than one version of the macabre tale involving the real Masha, and it's hard to know which one is truly accurate, but there's nothing stopping us from believing both could be true. Masha is a very common name in Russia, like Maria, for example. So it's no surprise that two Mashas, both having encounters with bears, a very common animal in Russia, inspired the folk tale that led to the animated show, making the little girl's name known worldwide. However, the story we'll discuss in this video, this one will send chills down your spine. In the folktale mentioned earlier, Masha is depicted as an innocent but clever girl. After all, hiding in a basket to escape the bear was pretty smart. In the animated series, she's basically a chaos agent who always finds ways to test the bear's patience. But according to this version, which took place sometime between 1780 and 1820, the real-life Masha was a poor girl with an intellectual disability and hyperactivity disorder who lived in a cabin with her parents. Her parents should have been supportive, helping her overcome her struggles to live peacefully. But unfortunately, she wasn't born to kind parents. Her parents secretly despised her, largely due to her disability. She needed special care, which left her parents with little free time and very stressed. Her hyperactivity also meant she constantly made messes, often driving them crazy. They regretted having her, never expecting her to be born with complications. At first, they tried to treat her kindly, but over time their facade slipped, and they decided to drop the act. Masha, who had always thought she was loved, didn't know what to think when her parents started yelling and hitting her over every little mistake. In time, she understood she'd never been truly loved. She had been abandoned in the forest before, managing to find her way back home by herself. She once thought her parents had only lost sight of her, but now she understood it was just one of several attempts to abandon her. Devastated by this realization, she wrapped a scarf around her head, grabbed a food basket, and ran away from home. The only other thing she took with her was her diary, as she loved writing about her life. How could you not feel sorry for Masha after hearing this? If you think she didn't deserve this, comment below with #Masha. Masha was very innocent and knew almost nothing about the world. She had no idea where to go and kept walking until nightfall, when she stopped and made a small shelter out of branches to sleep. But in the dead of night, strange noises came from the forest, interrupting her sleep. When she looked outside, she saw a huge bear wandering nearby, and she knew she'd be found if she stepped out of her shelter. So, Masha stayed down, pretending to still be asleep. Luckily it worked, as the bear moved on without noticing her. After that, the poor girl kept walking for days, searching for someone who could help her and love her in the way her parents never did. But as a little girl, she didn't know where to find the nearest village or town, and her only hope of finding others was if she got incredibly lucky. Each afternoon, after looking for any sign of another human and calling for help, she would return to her tiny twig shelter. Before sleeping, she wrote about her miserable life in her diary. After a few days, the inevitable happened. Masha ran out of food she'd taken when she left home. So, once more, she left her shelter, this time with the main goal of finding something to eat. She managed to gather several berries growing in the forest. But Masha had no idea that these berries were actually all poisonous. Not long after eating a few of the berries and putting some in her basket, she began to feel terrible dizziness and a stomach ache so intense that it was impossible to bear. She lay in her shelter for days, racked with pain and hunger, screaming for hours in hopes that someone might find and rescue her. When she was too exhausted to cry out, she used the little strength she had left to write in her diary as a way to escape her painful reality. Masha wrote about how she just wanted to be loved and have someone to play with, like she used to with her parents, not knowing that they despised her. 2 days later, a hunter exploring that forest stumbled upon her twig shelter. When he entered, he was shocked by what he found in front of him, the lifeless body of the little girl, covered in deep cuts and bites. He picked up the diary lying on the ground and read through all the experiences she had, growing more saddened and horrified with each word. What shook the hunter the most was the blood-stained text on the final page of her diary. "I think even the bear I met that day could love me more than my own parents." Afterward, the man kept walking through the forest and found something else strange, a bear's corpse lying close to the girl's shelter. At that moment he reread the diary and realized that Masha had been screaming so loudly that it must have drawn the attention of the bear living nearby. So, the creature found her in the shelter and began to devour her. But what the bear didn't expect was that the girl, before being caught, had eaten all the remaining poisonous berries she'd left in her basket. Even though she knew the food was contaminated, Masha's hunger was so overwhelming, and her hopes of survival had already faded. For the poor girl, losing her life with a full belly felt better than nothing. But as we know, it was the bear that ultimately ended Masha's life, and by trying to eat her, he ended up weak, eventually dying shortly afterward from the poison. The hunter was stunned by this tragic discovery, especially since Masha's final thoughts had been about her willingness to make friends with the very bear that was about to take her life. Once this story reached nearby villages, the news spread throughout much of Russia. Masha's parents, however, created a different version, claiming Masha had been a spoiled child who ran away out of defiance, only to be attacked by the bear because she hadn't remembered their warning to never go near bears. This story served to cover up the fact that they were the true cause of their own daughter's death. We only know about the real version of this story because that noble hunter revealed Masha's own account from her diary. These records likely inspired the Russian folk tale of Masha and the bear, which in turn served as the foundation for the animated show. While the folk tale and alternate versions try to teach that bears are very dangerous and that we should always be cautious around them, the true story is a tragic case of parents who mistreated their daughter. After all, the bear only ended her life because she fled her home, unable to bear being hated by her own parents. Perhaps Masha's friendship with the bear in the cartoon is meant as a tribute to the girl's sad end. She was willing to try to befriend the creature just to feel less alone. And in the end, they died together. Perhaps they shared a special connection. Maybe that's why Masha's parents don't appear in the show. While the Masha from the folktale lives with her grandparents, the Masha in the cartoon lives alone in the forest, just like the real-life Masha. By the way, did you know you can keep the fun going by clicking one of the 2 amazing videos on your screen? See you there. Thanks, and see you next time. Oh. Beautiful.